She left Wilmslow just after midday. No client bookings, no child in the car, just a destination and 2 black bags waiting at the other end. By the time she reached the Dartford Tunnel, they were in the boot. She didn't speed, she didn't panic, but someone was watching her every move. This is the story of Stephanie Nelson and how a pregnant beauty therapist became a trusted courier in a £1.5 million cocaine plot. Wilmslow wasn't cheap. Her street was lined with luxury homes, glossy cars in the drives. Hers was no different. She was renting a £2,400 a month home in a quiet corner of Cheshire. The kind of neighbourhood where everyone kept their gardens tidy and job titles carried weight. Stephanie Nelson was 30, 5 months pregnant, and ran a private clinic called Porsche Cosmetics in the heart of town. Clean branding, a modern look, a business that offered non-surgical beauty treatments to a loyal client base. Her presence was familiar, walking to her car, chatting with neighbours, dropping parcels at the salon. She'd once studied nursing before pivoting into beauty. Her business had an Instagram account, but her personal one stood out. More followers. Always travelling and dressed like she was flying first class. She posted photos from yachts in the Mediterranean, nights out at Marbella restaurants, and visits to designer stores. To most people, she looked like a successful beauty boss, stylish and driven. But something didn't add up. People noticed. Quiet comments from neighbours who thought about her lifestyle, but we will talk about it later in this video. A source close to her told a paper. She spent a lot, always ordering stuff. No one knew where it was all coming from. The money was real. But where it came from, that wasn't in the captions. Reports said she drove a white Hyundai X35, and at one point a Nissan GTR was also among her cars. But behind the luxury and photo ops, the National Crime Agency was building a very different picture. One that involved encrypted phones, mapped journeys, and patterns that didn't match the beauty industry. She wasn't on their radar for skin treatments. By early summer, they weren't just watching her, they were tracking her every move, from Wilmslow to Folkestone. And they weren't interested in beauty. But behind it all was something far more profitable. And that's what allegedly paid for the lifestyle. John Markham was in his 50s, lived in Enfield, and kept a low profile. He didn't have a job, nor run a gang, just a man with a van, the kind you wouldn't think twice about if you saw him in a pub car park. But on June 10th, that van became the middle link in a chain worth £1.5 million. At around 6:30 p.m, Stephanie Nelson pulled into the car park of the Yeoman pub in Bearsted, Kent. She wasn't there for a drink. Markham was already parked up, waiting in a small white van. The exchange was simple, direct. He opened the back, handed over a black holdall, then another. Nelson loaded both into her Hyundai, and within minutes, she was gone. Markham later claimed he was being paid just £106 to hand over these bags, but we will talk about it in the later part of this video. These weren't random bags, they were part of a carefully planned operation, holdalls filled with tightly packed bricks of cocaine. That job required more than blind obedience and trust. Markham didn't advertise what he was doing. He wasn't flashy, he didn't make noise, and that's exactly why he was chosen. Stephanie Nelson wasn't caught by accident. By the time she set off from her home Wilmslow on June 10th, authorities had already been watching. The National Crime Agency had picked up her pattern. Her Hyundai iX35 had been tracked making several unexplained trips south, including to Folkestone near the Kent coast. Each time, the stops were brief, long enough for a handover. On the day of her arrest, it wasn't just a one-off journey. It was part of a monitored route from Cheshire to Kent, one the NCA had seen more than once before. The car was registered in her name. She was driving alone. She didn't break speed limits or make calls, but every movement was being tracked. Her first stop that day was the Yeoman pub in Bearsted, a quiet village near Maidstone. Unremarkable, but ideal for a handoff. What neither of them saw was the quiet surveillance team that followed her north, waiting for the right moment to move in. The NCA didn't need to stop her yet. Not until the exchange was complete. Not until the bags were in the car. Not until she was driving away with what they believed, and later proved, was Class A. By the time Nelson entered the Dartford Tunnel, the plan was already in motion. Just before 7 p.m, Stephanie Nelson's Hyundai entered the Dartford Tunnel. Kent police were ready. They moved in and stopped the car. Nothing about her behavior raised suspicion. She cooperated. Officers began their inspection. The boot looked empty. No loose panels, no unusual fittings. On the surface, there was nothing to find. But they didn't stop there. They took the car to Thurrock Services for a more detailed search. That's where the puzzle started to make sense. In the floor of the boot was a concealed, magnetized compartment, invisible until triggered. The mechanism relied on the car's engine being switched on and the glove compartment being opened at the same time. When done correctly, the magnetic lock would disengage, revealing a hidden void built directly into the structure of the boot. Inside it, 2 black holdalls, just as officers had seen exchanged in the pub car park. Each bag was filled with blocks of cocaine. The total weight was 15 kilos and the purity was 83%. Each block was stamped with the words Premium 2020, a label often seen on large-scale imported shipments. Apart from this, the concealment method was no backseat job. It was precise, engineered, and discreet, the kind of modification that required planning, funding, and specialist knowledge. Police described it as sophisticated, a hide designed to beat scans, dogs, and checkpoints. Whatever she'd been told before that journey, by the time the void was opened, there was no denying what was inside. She was arrested immediately. The search was over, and the evidence was right in front of them. Later that same day, John Markham was arrested at his home in Enfield. This wasn't casual smuggling. It was a sealed and deliberate operation, and now fully exposed. Alongside the cocaine, officers found something else in Nelson's car. A mobile phone that looked ordinary, but wasn't. It was a BQ Aquaris handset, Spanish-made, fitted with a Dutch SIM, and fully encrypted. No calls, no browsing, just one function, sending and receiving heavily protected messages. Police described it as virtually impossible to crack. Phones like these aren't used for everyday business. They're for logistics, clean and silent instructions. Instructions for where to go, when to collect, and how to move. No names and calls, just encrypted codes. The presence of that handset told investigators something critical. She wasn't improvising. She was being directed. And more than that, she was trusted. This kind of device isn't handed to a stranger. Whoever gave it to her was confident she would follow instructions, stay quiet, and not lose the load. That's not how low-level runners are treated. It's how trusted couriers are equipped. The National Crime Agency believed this wasn't her first run. They suspected she'd done it before, possibly 5 times that year alone. Just quiet trips up and down the motorway. Each successful run meant hundreds of thousands in Class A delivered safely to the north. The white Hyundai, beauty clinic, and the Instagram posts. It all made her seem harmless. Just another businesswoman on the road. But to the people who gave her that phone and the drugs, she was more than that. She was reliable, invisible, and for that network, she was exactly what they needed. Wilmslow wasn't the kind of place you'd expect this. After her arrest, the salon signage was covered. A banner from the neighboring business was quickly hung over the Porsche Cosmetics name. Online listings began disappearing. Local shop owners told reporters they'd had no idea what was going on, not until they read it in the papers. One neighbor said she mostly kept to herself. No one expected anything like this. Others were stunned. They remembered her as glamorous, always well-dressed and friendly. No one expected the woman running a beauty clinic just off the high street to be facing serious Class A charges. Instagram painted the same picture. But the person behind the posts was now behind bars. For a small town like Wilmslow, the news spread fast. Clients, neighbors, other salon owners, people who'd crossed paths with her or followed her online. All of them wondered how it had happened and how none of them saw it coming. But now that picture is public. On the 11th of July 2019 at Maidstone Crown Court, prosecutors laid out the full picture. They told the court that Stephanie Nelson had played a trusted role in a cross-country trafficking run, collecting high-purity cocaine, concealing it in a modified compartment, and carrying an encrypted handset. Evidence, they argued, that this was no accident and not her first time. The Crown's case was clear. This wasn't a courier acting under pressure. It was someone knowingly moving Class A drugs with precision and planning. The defense presented a different version. Nelson's legal team said she had been pressured by a violent ex-partner, a man who had once left her with a suspected fractured eye socket. They claimed she was manipulated into collecting the bags, didn't know what was inside, and remained frightened of the man who had given her the instructions. She was, at the time of arrest, 5 months pregnant and the sole carer for her 7-year-old son. Her barrister described her as a caring mother from a law-abiding family, engaged to be married and trying to rebuild her life. Her co-defendant, John Markham, had his own version of events. Apart from unemployment and £106 paid for the job, he also insisted he had no knowledge of what was inside. But prosecutors questioned that claim. They pointed out that Markham appeared to be living far beyond his means, suggesting he'd played this role before. His involvement, they said, wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, trusted, and essential. Judge Philip Statman said there was very little evidence of recent coercion. He accepted that she had endured abuse, but described her actions as a deliberate course of conduct for financial gain. He added that both defendants had played critical roles in ensuring the safe passage of drugs and were clearly trusted by those higher up the chain. John Markham, aged 53, was sentenced to 10 years. He was described as the handoff man, and Stephanie Nelson, aged 30, was also sentenced to 10 years in prison for conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. The court identified her as a courier in a highly organized trafficking route. But the story didn't end there. In December 2019, Nelson appeared again for a proceeds of crime hearing. Prosecutors claimed she had benefited by over £692,000, but only £41.05 in assets could be recovered at the time. The court accepted a revised figure of £10,000 and ordered her to repay what was available, just £41.05. Shortly after, the COVID-19 pandemic brought widespread changes across the prison system. Local reports suggest Nelson was temporarily released under early release measures before returning to serve the rest of her sentence. These developments were reported by Manchester Evening News, Liverpool Echo, and The Sun, but have not been confirmed by national outlets or official court records. No further public updates on her sentence or status have been issued since. One run, 10 years, and just £41 to her name. What are your thoughts on the case and how it was handled? Let us know in the comments below. For more real UK crime stories, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us.